Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to focus on defined benefit pensions and specifically how you go about deciding when is the right time for you to start taking your DB pension and whether or not you take the tax-free cash lump sum. You might be working in the public sector, such as the NHS or local government, and will be retiring on a defined benefit pension. Or maybe you're working in the private sector and you might not be retiring with a defined benefit pension, but you might have one from earlier on in your career that was preserved or frozen at some point in time, likely around 2010. So irrespective of which situation you are in, retiring on a DB or have a mix of defined benefit and defined contribution, this video is for you. I'm not going to go into the differences between DB and DC in this video. I'm assuming that most of you are well aware of what those terms mean. There's information you can see on the screen right now in case anyone is in any doubt. So if you are in any doubt, pause the video right now, read through this information and then continue. The general way that DB schemes work is that you will be forecast to receive a certain pension, a guaranteed amount per year at a certain age, and they all operate in that general way. For example, perhaps if you're on the NHS pension scheme, and there are several different sections to it that you'll be well aware of, then you might be forecast to receive, say, a pension annual income starting at £20,000 per year at the age of 65. And each scheme, irrespective of where your DB is, whether it's a former private sector one or a public sector, will all have specifics of how they are going to increase each year. Many, if not most, have some kind of index linking. The general principles that I'll go through in this video to help you decide when to start taking your pension and whether or not to take a lump sum will apply no matter what scheme you're in, but do make a point of checking the specific details of your particular scheme. And of course, always seek professional help if you think you need it. When should you start taking it? You can start taking your DB pension from the normal retirement age, or NRA, and this is also sometimes called the normal pension age. This is the age at which you will get the full amount of your DB pension, the full starting annual amount, that is. For the NHS, that could be age 60, age 65, or could be linked with your state pension age, depending on which scheme that you are in. If your scheme allows you to start taking your pension early, then that will come with a reduced annual amount as opposed to the amount that you are forecast at your normal retirement age. And the simple, perhaps obvious reason for that is because your pension provider will need to pay you for a longer time. They need to pay you for more years. And so they are working out how much less they need to pay you per year in order to pay you the same total amount overall. And on the other hand, some schemes allow you to delay starting your pension so that you can start it after the normal retirement age in exchange for a higher annual income. Understanding the tax-free cash limit. Now I'm going to go into worked examples later in the video, so stay tuned for that. But the general principle of taking the tax-free cash lump sum is something you need to be aware of, is that you are allowed to take up to 25% in tax-free cash across all of your combined pensions. Now, if you worked in the NHS or local government for the entirety of your career, you might only have one DB pension forecast and one tax-free cash lump sum to take. But if you were working in the private sector and have a mix of DB and DC, you're allowed to take 25% in tax-free cash across the entirety of your pensions, and the maximum that you are allowed to take is £268,275, unless you have protection whereby you can take a higher amount of tax-free cash as an absolute figure. You will know if you have that level of protection. The situation will be a bit more complicated for those of you that have a combination of DB and DC, because you will want to carefully consider which, if any, of your different pension schemes you are taking the tax-free cash from. The implications for taking tax-free cash out of DB versus DC are different. The details of the considerations are outside of the scope for this particular video, but I wanted to make that point. We're focusing specifically on DB here, but bear in mind that the total tax-free cash that you're allowed to take is the total amount across the entirety of your pensions, irrespective of the pension type. Sue's pension choices, real life example. Let's go through the example of Sue. who is 55 and is a senior nurse with the NHS, and she has a defined benefit forecast at the age of 65 of £18,000 per year. Like many people, Sue has asked herself whether it's worth starting to take her DB income early. What would it be at the age of 60? Now, as an aside, in case you're not aware, when you start taking your DB, it doesn't mean that you've had to retire necessarily. There's no rule that says that you have to stop working in order to take your DB. If you do decide to keep working, then of course you have to take tax into consideration, because your DB income will be added onto any additional taxable income that you have and might take you into a tax bracket that you don't want to be in. Going back to Sue's decision making, she requests a forecast from her pension administrator as to how much income she would receive from her DB if she started taking it at 60 instead of the normal retirement age of 65. And the typical reduction that you could expect is around 4 to 5% per year. So for Sue, that would be a total of around a 22.5% reduction. So her full pension at 65 is £18,000 per year. So the reduction for Sue would be £4,050 per year, which means her reduced pension income at the age of 60 would be £13,950. And by the way, I won't be taking annual increases into account when I'm working out these calculations. So how does Sue go about whether or not it's worth her starting her DB earlier at the age of 60 instead of 65 based on these figures? 5 years worth of income at that reduced amount is just short of £70,000. So if Sue waits until she's 65 and gets £18,000 per year, she will have missed out on that almost £70,000 by waiting until the age of 65. The way Sue would figure out whether or not it was worth it is to ask herself, how long would it take to make up for that £70,000 if she were to take the full pension at 65? And so the answer is it would take her around 17.2 years to make up for it. Just using this simple maths and not taking annual increases into account, if Sue lives beyond the age of 82, then it will have paid off for her to wait until she gets the full amount of pension. If she thinks that she has a longevity problem in her family, whereby she's living well into her 90s, then she's better off waiting. But on the other hand, Sue might decide that she won't need as big an income when she gets to her late 80s, early 90s, and so she's happy to start taking it earlier despite the reduced amount and despite the point at which she will break even, should Sue take the lump sum. Let's go through the decision making for Sue as to how she decides whether or not to take the tax-free lump sum at age 65. As we've gone through earlier with a DB pension, you have the option of taking up to 25% of its value as a tax-free lump sum. And then using something called a commutation factor, the actuaries work out how much your annual pension income will be reduced by when you take the tax-free lump sum up front. This commutation factor is usually around 20, but it can differ for your particular scheme. What I mean by the commutation factor, if it was 20 to 1, is that you lose £1 of income per year for every £20 of tax-free cash that you take. But as I said, the commutation factor for your DB scheme could be different than 20 to 1. So in terms of the total capital value of Sue's pension at the normal retirement age of 65, it's £360,000. And so the maximum tax-free cash that Sue's able to take is 25% of this, which is £90,000. And to generate £90,000, Sue would be giving up £4,500 per year of her pension, such that the new pension income is £13,500 instead of £18,000. So how does she work out whether or not this is worth it? It's a similar kind of logic as the previous example that we went through about deciding whether or not to take your pension early. So to work out the break-even point for this scenario, Sue takes her £90,000 lump sum, divides that by the annual loss of income, which tells her it would take 20 years to break even. So when she reaches the age of 85. So what we mean in this example is that if Sue expects to live beyond the age of 85, it would be worth her taking the full pension and not taking the lump sum up front. And that's purely in mathematical terms. But of course, it's not just about the maths and about the greater income and the break-even point. Perhaps Sue wants greater flexibility. Perhaps she has good reason to want to take a tax-free lump sum up front. Perhaps she wants to go on a big holiday. Maybe she has a mortgage to pay off. But also the fact that Most people are more active and spend more in the early years of retirement. So by taking the tax-free lump sum, she can front load her income and is more comfortable with a lower income later on. So taking the tax-free cash isn't just about the maths, it's about other considerations such as lifestyle and flexibility. Can you take income early and take a lump sum? So most DB schemes will not only allow you to take the income earlier than your normal retirement date, but if you decide to do that, you can also take the tax-free cash as well. Now, of course, these two factors will compound each other because you will get a much greater reduction. Not only are you having the reduction for starting your DB earlier, you're also having the reduction in the annual pension amount for taking the tax-free cash as well. Let's go through the logic for this double example. We know that the amount of Sue's pension is reduced by, if she decides to take it at 60, is 13,950, down from the 18,000, and the total capital value of that is just short of £280,000. So the lump sum that she would be allowed to take from this would be just short of 70,000. And using the same commutation factor as before, that's an income reduction of just under £3,500 per year, giving Sue an annual pension income of just under £10,500. Going through the same calculation as before, Sue's break-even point for this scenario is now 81.2 years. Now, of course, I'm using specific maths here that's specific to Sue. Your particular numbers might work out differently. How the scenarios work out in terms of the break-even point for you might be very different, but hopefully the logic I've gone through in this video will help you calculate which scenario might be more favourable for you, and based on the numbers, whether it might be better for you to start taking your DB earlier and taking tax-free cash as well. But please do seek professional advice if you are at all unsure, because the decisions you are making about your DB pensions are very, very important and are irreversible. So it's not a decision that you should take lightly. But I wanted to illustrate the impact that it could have if you decided to take the income earlier. That could give you options that you might not otherwise have. You might be surprised by the quotation you get for starting the DB income a few years earlier. And as I've said so many times, time is the most precious thing we have. So if you take nothing else from this video, the take-home message is that you don't necessarily have to wait for the normal retirement age. Go and get a quotation for what you could get if you started to take the income earlier, and the amount of reduction that you would get to your income if you were to take the tax-free cash as well. Fundamental to everything when it comes to retirement is making sure that you have a clear plan. You are clear on how much income you need, and then you can decide what flexibility that you might have with your DB and your DC income if you have an additional workplace pension or SIP, self-invested personal pension, on top of your DB. Let me know in the comments if any of you have gone through this kind of analysis and made the decision to start taking your DB earlier than the normal retirement age. Thank you so much for watching to the end. If you've got to this point and you are not a subscriber, it would really help me out with the YouTube algorithm if you take a second to click that subscribe button, because YouTube will keep presenting you with my videos now that you've watched one. But it really helps me out if you take a second to click the subscribe button. It's completely free. Thank you so much. Until next time, hwyl fawr am y tro.